You think you're cold. Try the little ice age rivers, locked in ice for months. Harvests collapsing across Europe and, yet the people with the least still outlast the ones with everything. Medieval peasants saw roughly a 90% winter survival rate, but inside castles it was closer to 100%. Not because of banquets or bottomless stores, but because of three architectural tricks most folks miss. The third one sounds downright foolish until you grasp the physics. Start with the walls. Not just thick, monumental, 15 to 20 feet of stone in places, wide enough to hide a passage. Everyone tells you they're for arrows and catapults. True, but they're also giant stone sweaters. Stone soaks up heat slowly by day and bleeds it back at night, turning the entire keep into a thermal battery. While you're shivering in a modern box with wafer-thin walls, they enjoyed steady, even warmth wrapped in thousands of tons of masonry. There's a catch. Of course. Bore a window through 20 feet of stone, and you've made a tunnel. Light crawls in like a dying flashlight. Enter the arrow slit, narrow enough to keep missiles out, angled to admit just enough light while losing minimal heat. Medieval energy efficiency before anyone coined the term. Close the shutters, draw oiled cloth, hang heavy tapestries, and suddenly your keep becomes a stone thermos. Winter gales rattle timber villages. Within the castle, weak sun trickles into the walls, and the walls banquet for nightfall. Some stretches are so absurdly thick they swallow secret stairs. Try pitching that to your contractor. I'd like a hallway inside my wall. They'd suggest therapy. But thermal batteries need a charger. That meant fire vast, hungry, glorious fire. Step into a winter castle, and the showpiece is the hearth. Big enough to roast an ox, 8 feet wide, and tall enough for a man to stand in. This isn't a cozy suburban nook. It's a stone beast that heats, cooks, and declares, go big or freeze. The great hall's central blaze did double duty, and towering chimneys pulled smoke up and out before everyone turned into smoked venison. Some builders went further, channeling warm air through flues set within the wall's medieval radiant, heating that worked as long as an army of servants fed wood and scraped ash. The bill, endless labor. Fuel had to be felled, split, hauled. Keeping that inferno alive made better athletes than any gym membership. Still, the hearth did something beyond physics. Kith pulled people together. Fireplaces were medieval water. Coolers where lords, guests, and servants crowded close, sharing heat and gossip in the glow. Wealth bought options. Multiple hearths burning in different chambers, each placed carefully along interior walls so warmth could seep next door. Every degree mattered when winter wanted you dead. And even then, comfort was relative. You still bundled up like an Arctic expedition. Indoors. Now the room strategy. A great hall wasn't just grandeur. It was a heat management device. Instead of wasting wood across a dozen chilly rooms, everyone converged in one. Pack in 50, 100, a few hundred bodies. Add dogs sprawled by the blaze and the scent of roasting meat, and you've built a human-powered furnace. Yes, those soaring ceilings let heat climb out of reach. Dramatic, inefficient, breathtaking but clever hangings fought back. When the feast ended, heavy curtains carved the hall into smaller pockets, trapping warmth where people actually lived and slept. Nobles might slip away to chambers. Everyone else bedded down on rush-covered floors in the warmest space available. It wasn't luxury, it was survival. Shared meals weren't just communal. They were thermal strategy. Pack the room, raise the temperature. The air got ripe smoke, sweat, cooking all of it, trapped by draft blockers. But better a crowded, steamy hall than a frozen tomb. Drafts were the enemy, and castle folk fought them with textile warfare. Tapestries were not mere bragging banners. They were thick, woven insulation. Hang them a palm's breadth off stone, and you create a dead air space that blunts the chill. Doorways gained stacked curtains, forming crude airlocks, centuries before the word existed. Entire wings shut down for winter, so heat wasn't squandered on empty rooms. Window splays, the angled stone recesses around those tiny openings, weren't just pretty. They bent wind and spread light. Some rooms used double doors, so a gust couldn't barge straight in each time someone entered. And if it plugged a hole, it qualified as tech. Straw, old cloaks, hides anything, got stuffed into cracks. Come summer, half the barriers came down to let breezes pour through. Seasonal climate control, medieval style. There was a trade-off nobody glamorizes. Seal out the wind and you keep more smoke. The choice was primo freeze or cough. The smartest trick was vertical. Heat rises. They exploited it ruthlessly. Upper floors ran warmer, so the best sleeping spaces climbed to the tower. Downstairs might hover just above freezing. 2-3 stories up felt almost cozy. Guards often slept on the level below the lords' chambers, their bodies and braziers quietly knocking the edge off the chill for the rooms above. Life followed a thermal schedule. Daylight work near windows, on lower floors for light, evening migration upward, like heat-seeking arrows. Floor plans reflected the physics storage in the cold zones. Common rooms in the temperate middle, beds up top. This wasn't just comfort. In a world where a winter illness could kill faster than any blade, finding warmer air at night kept you alive. Some lords pushed the envelope beneath your feet. Borrowing from Rome, a few installs of hypercost underfloor heating threaded hot air through stone channels under pavements. Furnaces roared at the edges. Floors warmed gradually and held the heat like a slab of sun. When it worked, it was magic barefoot on warm stone, while snow piled outside, gentle radiant heat without the smoke of an open hearth. When it failed, it was ruinous. Only the wealthiest could build and maintain it, and repairs meant ripping up floors to chase a stubborn flue. Still, where it survives in the archaeology, the engineering looks eerily modern. Baffles, risers, flow paths proof they understood how to move heat even if they lacked thermodynamics in Latin. And through all of it, clothing finished the job. Architecture gave you a shell. Garments made the microclimate. Wool was the star knot for fashion, for physics. It traps air, stays warm, even wet, and stacks beautifully. Layering wasn't random. It was doctrine. Linen or fine wool close to skin to manage moisture. Bulk layers to hold heat. An outer shield against wind and damp. Furs escalated everything: wolf, rabbit, bird trimming hoods, lining boots, edging cloaks. Hoods weren't decoration. They sealed heat round the head and neck. Muffs and fur-lined pockets turned hands into tools instead of ice. The challenge was mobility. Try drawing a sword through 4 layers and a fur mantle, and you see why winter silhouettes look so bulky in old art. Behind it all stood an ectic, raising flocks, spinners and weavers turning fleece into fabric, furriers cutting and stitching hides. The rich rotated layers when they got wet. The poor guarded a single cloak like a lifeline. One soaking could spell disaster. That's the medieval winter playbook. Walls that banked heat, hearths that fed it, halls and hangings that trapped it, vertical living that chased it upward, rare heated floors that spread it, and clothing that kept it close. No thermostats, no insulation ratings, just stone. Wood wool and a stubborn refusal to let winter win. Let's talk bedtime warfare, the nightly siege against cold. A castle's stone gives you the macroclimate. The bed creates the microclimate. For posts, a canopy, curtains drawn tight like ship sails. In a gale suddenly you're sleeping inside a warm tent within a cold room. Linen closest to skin, wool above, fur on top, and that heavy coverlet acts like a lid on a pot. You don't heat the chamber. You heat the space the size of your breath. Simple, brutal, effective. Featherbeds, if you're lucky. Otherwise, straw ticks stuffed thick and swapped out when they go flat or musty. The trick is loft. More trapped air, more warmth. A warming pan rakes a little ember heat under the covers. Nice idea, dangerous if you're careless. So, most households prefer hot bricks or stones wrapped in cloth. Slip to the foot of the bed, like a tame volcano. By the time your feet find them, they've mellowed to a slow, steady radiance. Braziers are the roamers of the heating world, portable bowls of charcoal, set where bodies gather. Perfect in theory, treacherous in practice. Charcoal is a silent thief of air, so wise stewards crack a shutter or leave a passage ajar to keep the room breathing. That's the medieval mantra. Never trap warmth so tightly you trap your last breath with it. Textiles do half the work. Bed curtains, wall hangings, floor rushes layered with herbs, lavender, rosemary soften echoes and soften drafts. Those rushes are insulation you can sweep out and replace. Sprinkle them with dried mint, and even a smoky hall smells almost civilized. Above you, the canopy catches rising warmth. Around you, the curtains kill the wind. Beneath you, the mattress lifts you off the stone's hunger. Lighting helps more than moods. Tallow dips barely glow, but a rank of candles or an oil lamp tucked behind a screen throws crumbs of heat into the bubble where people talk, read, mend. Kitchens do the real heavy lifting. The bakehouse stays warm long after the last loaf, its oven bellies holding heat like domesticated boulders. Stewards plan traffic, so work happens where warmth already exists. Knead dough by the ovens, stitch by the hearth, right near a sunlit splay by day and a brazier by night. Windows if you're rich, thin panes of horn, mica, Even early glass blur the wind without surrendering all the light. Everyone else plays chess with shutters, open to catch a noon sunbeam, closed hard before dusk. Window seats are deep for a reason. The stone splay funnels winter light, while the surrounding mass blunts the draft. You tuck into that nook and feel the difference in your bones. Vertical planning continues after dark. Children and elders sleep higher, near stored heat and away from damp ground air. Guards, laundresses, grooms, those who must rise early keep closer to work floors, with braziers banked and ready. The watch stirs the fires at set hours, knocking ash, feeding fuel, keeping chimneys drawing so the hall doesn't wake to a lungful of last night's smoke. Moisture is the quiet enemy. Wet wool kills warmth, so drying racks crowd the hearth's margin. Cloaks, steaming mittens, spread like small flags. Boots turn to sip the heat, but not drink it. Kitchens hang damp herbs and linen near, not over, flames. Laundry days align with weather windows' crisp wind. Weak sun anything that snatches damp from cloth before night clamps down again. Even the waste spaces work in your favor. Latrine towers and flues act like lungs for the building, pulling cold air from low to high and out. If you mind them right, close the wrong door, and you stall the draft. Open the right one, and the whole stack hums. A castle is not a box, it's a wind instrument you play to a winter rhythm. Morning is a ritual. Coals banked under ash glow like buried stars. The first servant uncovers them, feeds split kindling, coaxes flame with a twist of straw. The hall stirs, curtains part, dogs stretch by the fire, steam ghosts off yesterday's cloaks. Breakfast isn't just food, it's heat you can swallow, pottage thick enough to stand a spoon. Ale with body, a crust still breathing from the oven. Clothing strategy mirrors architecture. You don't wear one huge garment any more than you heat one huge room. You nest layers. Linen to move sweat, wool to hold air, fur to shrug off wind. Hoods seal the chimney of your body. Mitts make hands useful. Fur-lined pockets become pocket furnaces. If you must work outside, you time it mid-morning to early afternoon. Wind to your back, breaks near a lee wall. When you return, you shed the outer shell, keep the inner warmth, and let the hall finish the job. And always, economy underwrites survival. Firewood is coin your feed to flames, so nothing burns alone without purpose. The great hearth cooks while it heats. Ovens bake while they cure damp. A brazier warms hands while it dries boots. Tapestries display a story while they trap a layer of air. Every object wears two faces, one for use, one for warmth, and that's the art of not dying in a stone house when winter means business by late winter. When the air outside could split your knuckles open and the sky pressed down like dull iron, the castle lived on rhythm alone. The fires had personalities, by then each hearth its own heartbeat. In the great hall, flames spoke in steady roars. In the kitchens, they crackled like gossip. In the chambers, they whispered, low and loyal. The scent of wood smoke fused with wool, with leather, with the faint sweetness of dried herbs, hidden in rush mats. You didn't smell smoke anymore. You smelled life. Servants learned to read heat the way sailors read wind. A palm near the stone told them if the draft was healthy. The color of soot on a flue's edge told them whether to open or close a vent. One servant too slow with the ash rake, and half a floor could fill with smoke. One too eager, and the fire gasped and died. Keeping a castle warm wasn't a matter of comfort, it was a full-time operation. An orchestra of oxygen and patience. Nights were quieter, but never still. Wind prowled along battlements, testing shutters for weakness. You could hear it in your sleep, a low, endless moan, like the sea pressing against cliffs. Inside, tapestries billowed slightly as drafts slipped through unseen seams, and the candles bent their flames sideways, as if bowing to the cold. When the air outside howled, you could feel the stone hum. Those same walls that guarded against siege also absorbed the storm's fury, and softened it into a muted trum. Upstairs, lords and ladies slept beneath draped canopies that trapped warmth like woven clouds. Below them, guards dozed on benches wrapped in cloaks, boots still on, swords within reach. The smell of iron mingled with animal warmth from the stables one level beneath. Horses snorted, shifted, exhaled steam through their nostrils, heating the air that rose through floor cracks. Even the beasts contributed to the architecture of survival. At dawn, frost clung to the arrow slits like lace, and the breath of everyone who passed left ghosts on the air. The first light struck the walls and began the slow daily exchange, stone soaking up thin gold, preparing to give it back by nightfall. Kitchen fires were rekindled, bread dough punched down and set near the oven's flank to rise in the captured warmth. Everything in the castle's morning moved with purpose. Heat something, feed something, repair something before the cold noticed you again. The soundscape changed to firewood splitting, carried like drum beats through corridors. Buckets of water sloshed faintly as they thawed near the hearth. You'd hear the rhythmic clang of iron pokers against andirons. The whoosh as a shutter opened to let smoke drift out and morning light spill in. Life and heat were synonyms. Now one couldn't exist without the other. Meals were timed with the day's natural breathing. Midday feasts weren't about celebration. They were about storing warmth inside the human body when the sun offered its brief truce. The thickest stews simmered in blackened cauldrons, rich with barley, root vegetables, and shreds of salted meat. Every spoonful radiated slow heat outward. After eating, you could walk the draftiest corridor and feel a small sun burning inside your ribs. By afternoon, work shifted toward maintenance. Ash pits were emptied, hearthstones scrubbed with sand, new wood stacked by size and dryness. Soot flecks clung to everything: eyelashes, cuffs, even ink on parchment. Messengers rubbed their hands near braziers before breaking seals on wax letters. The castle was alive in the way a forge is alive. Its purpose wasn't serenity, but endurance. And yet, for all that endurance, there were moments of comfort so delicate they almost broke your heart. The hush after dinner, when the hall's great fire burned low and the light went amber. The murmur of a minstrel tuning a lute near the warmest corner. The sight of steam curling from a hound's muzzle as it slept too close to the embers. The soft glow of rushlights turning stone into honey. For a few hours each night, the castle didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a hearth big enough for a kingdom. Then the wind would shift again, and someone would rise to tend the fire. A poker scraped, sparks leaped, the rhythm resumed. Because in a medieval winter, warmth wasn't a luxury. It was a covenant between stone and flame, between bodies and walls, between ingenuity and the relentless cold waiting just beyond the gate. When the cold dug in deepest, when the rivers froze thick enough to hold a cart, and the air itself seemed to turn metallic, the castle became a single living creature: stone, lungs breathing smoke, heart of fire beating under vaulted ribs. Every person inside played an organ in that body. The cook kept the stomach alive, the smith the sinews, the servants the circulation. Lose rhythm, and frost crept in like an infection. Down in the cellars, barrels and salted stores waited like buried treasure. Meat hung from hooks, wrapped in cloth stiff as bark. Casks of ale and wine lined the walls, the liquids too thick to pour without warming first. A small fire smoldered at one end, tended by a boy who measured his own importance in embers. The castle's warmth began here, and climbed upward, heat rising through stone floors, softening the chill above. In the chambers above, every layer mattered. Tapestries told stories, saints and beasts, victories and parables, but their real purpose was silence. They quieted echo and stilled the hiss of wind through seams. A bare wall was a wound. A covered wall was armor. Rugs were the same woven shields laid across cold stone, so bare feet didn't bite with every step. The wealthiest families could afford layers upon layers, turning their private rooms into cocoons of fabric and fur. For the servants, warmth came from motion. If you stopped moving, you invited winter to claim you. In the great hall, the social engine never stopped turning. A lord might call for music, not out of joy, but necessity. Laughter was fuel. Bodies were radiators. Conversation a way to forget the ache in your fingers. Dancers stamped their feet to rhythms that shook heat from the floor. Minstrels plucked strings that vibrated in the same frequency as the roaring fire. Even celebration had a practical pulse. It kept the blood moving. Outside, guards walked the ramparts in layered cloaks, faces hidden behind wool hoods. Their torches hissed in the wind, casting amber halos on the frost. Each circuit of the walls was both duty and survival, a way to keep limbs from stiffening. If the flame flickered too low, they leaned close to the brazier near the gatehouse, whispering about the sun, as if it were an old friend who might return any day now. Animals huddled together in the lower wards. Cows stood flank to flank, exhaling slow clouds into the straw. Pigs buried themselves under hay, snuffling softly. Horses stamped and shifted, restless under their thick winter coats. The warmth they gave off was immense body heat rising through gaps in the floorboards above, adding another invisible layer to the castle's heating plan. The stables were less barn than breathing furnace. By evening, the castle shimmered with gradients of temperature, the kitchens almost tropical, the halls temperate, the outer corridors sharp as knives. Servants learned to move through them in waves, warming up in one before crossing another. It was a dance choreographed by instinct. Touch the heat, carry it with you, pass it along. Above all, timing was everything. You didn't waste firewood during the day, if sunlight, weak as it was, could shoulder some of the work. At dusk, Shutters slammed, tapestries were straightened, curtains drawn tight. The night watch kindled torches, not just for sight, but to coax the air to move upward, keeping smoke clear. Even the smallest flame had purpose. A single candle could keep ink from freezing, or fingers from stiffening over parchment. And yet, amid all the engineering and vigilance, there was still a kind of peace. The cold made everything deliberate. You didn't move fast unless you had to. You didn't waste a breath. When the world outside howled, the stone whispered back in low, resonant warmth. People gathered close not just for comfort, but for connection. The same fire that baked bread, dried tears, forged tools, lit prayers, taught in those long months of frost. The castle wasn't just a fortress against enemies, it was a fortress against nature itself. Every wall, every beam, every stitch of wool worked together in quiet rebellion against extinction. They weren't surviving winter, they were mastering it. By the time spring loosened its grip, the castle stood unchanged, solid and unyielding. Proof that intelligence, cooperation, and stone could outlast the coldest season the world could throw. When the thaw finally began, it didn't arrive with trumpets, it crept in quietly. Like a secret the earth whispered to itself. The moat cracked first, sheets of ice sighed and split, and the water beneath moved sluggishly, like a creature waking from hibernation. Meltwater traced silver veins down the castle's flanks, dripping from gargoyles and pooling in the courtyard mud. You could smell it, the wet, raw scent of earth, remembering what warmth felt like. Inside, everything changed rhythm. Fires no longer raged so high. They smoldered now, slow and lazy. Servants opened shutters at midday to let pale sunlight in, blinking against the brightness. The air carried a new weightless smoke, more promise. Stone that had felt heavy for months seemed to exhale. Even the tapestries hung differently, looser, no longer stretched tight against drafts. The great hall remained the castle's heart, but its pulse slowed. The roaring fire turned to coals. Meals grew lighter, broths instead of stews, bread instead of barley mash. Dogs dozed in patches of sunlight rather than pressed against the hearth. People lingered near windows, tracing fingers through the condensation that no longer froze into lace. Spring was not yet kind, but it was trying. Down in the courtyards, the soundscape shifted from cracking ice to the scrape of rakes and the slap of wet laundry. Stable boys led shaggy horses into the yard to brush away winter's coat, clouds of fur and dust filling the thawing air. Chickens picked at the toss of ground, rediscovering worms that hadn't wriggled in months. The castle was coming alive, molecule by molecule. The architects who'd designed these fortresses had known. This season, tooth-away stone held not just heat, but momentum. The warmth banked inside the walls through winter now bled outward, gently, as if giving something back. On sunny days, you could press your palm against the outer rampart and feel the ghost of winter fires still pulsing within. The physics of survival had turned into the poetry of endurance. Nobles moved through corridors in lighter cloaks, voices echoing differently, less muffled by fabric, more buoyant. Servants scrubbed floors and opened storerooms, airing out the damp scent of months sealed tight. Smoke stains were scraped from chimneys, and firewood stores were measured not in worry this time, but in pride. What remained meant victory. Yet, even as warmth returned, no one forgot what it had cost. Fingers bore small scars from tending embers. Cloaks smelled forever faintly of soot. Lungs remembered the sting of cold smoke. Survival leaves its fingerprints. The servants who had shared their breath to keep the fires alive. The guards who had paced all night under frozen stars. The cooks who had kept the ovens burning. They had earned their place in the stone's memory. Night still carried a chill, but it was gentler, now a reminder rather than a threat. Fires were banked, not fought. People laughed longer. Music sounded different in the softened air, lutes brighter, voices freer. The castle no longer hummed with tension, but with relief, a low vibration of gratitude that needed no words. And when dawn finally rose warm enough that the frost did not return, when the fields beyond the walls began to show hints of green, the castle's purpose shifted again from endurance to preparation. The same hands that had fed flames now turned soil. The same stone corridors that had echoed with winter's silence, now filled with the footsteps of merchants and messengers. Life was not restarting. It was resuming, exactly where it had paused. The truth of the medieval winter was never just about hardship. It was about design, instinct, and unity. Every beam, every brick, every heartbeat had joined in the same quiet mission, to hold back death until light came again. When that light finally returned, it touched the castle walls and found them scarred but steadfast proof that survival itself can be an art form, and that warmth, once earned, becomes a kind of wisdom that never fully fades.